Job creation in Nigeria is a high priority, with the new administration coming in just over a month's time. KPMG's Global Economic Outlook has an analysis of Nigeria's economy, among others, and it is projecting a rise in the unemployment figures of Africa's largest economy. Let's take a look at those projections from KPMG. For 2022, 37.7%, 2023, 40.6%, and 2024, 43.9%. Here's a quote from the company saying that unemployment is expected to continue to be a major challenge due to the limited investment by the private sector, low industrialization, and slower than required economic growth, and consequently the inability of the economy to absorb the 4 to 5 million new entrants into the Nigerian job market every year. Let's look at GDP projections for Nigeria from the IMF and World Bank. IMF slowing from 3.2% to 3%, and the World Bank staying under 3% at 2.9% for 2023 and 2024. All right, beginning May 1st, 2023, MultiChoice will apply yet another price increase across all of its DSTV bundles. This occurred in April 2022, 1 year after it announced and carried out a comparable upward review of prices. The price increases for the various DSTV packages range from 16.3% to as much as 18.6%, and the company claims that the most recent price increases are due to the company's ongoing economic difficulties. Nigeria's large debt continues to be a topic of focus for economists and analysts alike. Economic think tank Financial Derivatives Company Limited has looked at Nigeria's use of proceeds from issuing securities, debt securities, and described the use of the proceeds as Ponzi Finance. What is sovereign Ponzi Finance? Oluwatomi Mayowa, who's an analyst with FTC, joins us to discuss further. Oluwatomi, you're very welcome. Good morning to you.
Thank you very much for having me.
I read your article, from FTC. Well, very interesting. So help our viewers out. What is sovereign Ponzi Finance?
I'd like to say, anybody there's nobody that doesn't really know about the, when you just mentioned Ponzi scheme, and, it's either you've been in that situation before, or you've heard about it. So it's not far-fetched, right? Anybody can understand what we mean. But, looking at it from the perspective of Nigeria, it's talking about how we, finance our debts by also borrowing. It's just, what Ponzi means is talking from, Charles, was gotten from Charles Ponzi, who promised investors that he was going to earn a particular return on their investment, through arbitrage, trading. By the end of the day, it was actually financing, paying back the debts by actually borrowing more. And it got to a time it was not, sustainable, and then it just defaulted. So, bringing it to the situation of Nigeria, at the moment, what we are doing is borrowing to pay back our loan, and that is actually not sustainable. If you look at the fact, because what should be done is actually borrowing, then using it to build up projects whereby that you derive revenue from that, and then use that proceed to pay back the debt. But in the situation we are in right now is we're just borrowing and then pay, and then looking at the situation when there's global shock. That's, defects actually, it's always exacerbated as a result of, those global shocks. And then we begin to see all of this play out as a result of mismanagement. Speaking of mismanagement,
what are the, dangers of high debt for those who are not aware?
I would say the examples are everywhere already, especially for African countries. Looking at Ghana, looking at Zambia, looking at, Sri Lanka and all of that. So if this, like I usually say that, having huge debts is not the problem, but a situation whereby you can pay back that loan without, having any problem as regards paying it is what is very important. But then we've seen that Nigeria is now servicing its debts by, with about 80% of its, or 80 to 90% of its revenue, which is actually not sustainable. So basically, what we begin to see is, you will not be able to perform your fiscal obligations. Fiscal consolidation now becomes a priority, whereby you begin to exert short-term pains on people. What you should have done before, then you're not having to do it by all means. So it will be difficult for the government to be able to finance their project because they have to focus on paying their debts, and which is actually detriment to the economy and helping in sustaining growth for the economy. So it has its huge effects on the economy.
What about if I was to say, well, Oluwatomi, okay, that's all well and good, but debt to GDP in Nigeria as at September, I think, of last year was 35.2%. That's under the self-imposed 45% ceiling. Yeah, there's the numbers right there. So for those who say, what about that? What's your response? Is that not a good thing?
Well, I would say for let's give an example of Mauritius. Has a debt of about that's debt to GDP ratio of about 74%. Yeah. But it's it's all about the debt to the revenue to debt. Yeah. Debt service to revenue ratio, and which when you look at Mauritius, it's about 18%, roughly 18%. I'll look at United States, for example, has about 126% of debt to GDP ratio. But when you look at its debt to its revenue to debt service ratio, it's about less than 10%. So it's all about how to, how much do you generate to be able to service that debt that is accumulating. And looking at Nigeria's situation, it's about 90% of its revenue as at 2022. And if that continues to be the trend, it's definitely going to be difficult and gets to our neck, and then we cannot do anything about it. So it's not really about the GDP, because you are not just going to go into the economy and just plug in your hand and just
take money out
and just get the whole 200 trillion naira, which is about GDP size, and then use it to pay your debt. No. Yeah. So it's just about the revenue. How much can the government generate to be able to pay back that debt? And so that's what we are saying now.
You mentioned examples, Sri Lanka, Ghana. These are countries that have, I think it's Zambia or Zimbabwe, that are defaulted. Yes. Is Nigeria in danger of a default?
Well, I would say that if Nigeria is not doing something about the debt situation right now, we could be at a very high risk of default, because at this point we are getting to a point whereby we cannot afford to just look. We have to do something concerning our debt situation, and we must know that these countries that actually defaulted, they defaulted in a time where there was this global shock. And whenever there's this global shock, it's kind of, pushes, allow the whole defect to come to bear. So you just begin to see those fragilities come, they are more exposed when there's this global shock. So we've had COVID, we've had Russia-Ukraine war, and look at how that had serious impact to this economy. So when we don't deal with these things begin to, escalate when there are global shocks, when they are, even as it is now, as at 2022, we saw how the Russia-Ukraine war really affected us. So we're at the point whereby we have to do something about it, lest we become like,
Sri Lanka or Ghana. All right, so your article, you listed some solutions. What steps should be taken?
Well, first of all, I would say that for example, the IMF has been giving, various policies to which, the Nigeria can, be able to come back to the sustainable debt. And one of it is, removing the subsidy, of which is all over everywhere now that it's going to be taken away. But key thing is that, there can be short-term pain, but it has a long-term impact. So which is positive. So because once you have been able to reduce that load on the expenditure, you'll be able to direct it to productive sectors, which will actually generate more income for you, and then increasing our tax base and collection, improving our collection methods. They are very, very important. So also another policy is debt restructuring. We do not have to get to the point where we default on our loan before we start restructuring our debt. So it's better we come to terms with our creditors now, so that we do not fall into, because when we have a debt default, it's going to send investors totally out of the country, and then it's just like a fall from a high points down, and that's definitely not good for us and for the economy.
Let me quickly ask you about MultiChoice. For those who are watching, I think they're either watching, you can watch Arise News as right now live, www.arise.tv, our website. You can watch on YouTube, and you can also watch on DSTV. So prices are going up. What do you make of this latest hike from MultiChoice?
Well, it's just about the cost of doing business. It's actually increasing, and they have no other way to bear this cost than to pass that cost to their consumers or their customers. And so that's why we are seeing that increase. And then the deals they settle with, live, those that are having to hold live broadcast and, Premier Leagues and all of that. So they have to just push in that cost to the consumers. And that's why we are seeing that price hike. Although there are many questions about if they are going to be able to retain their customers, because people just be like, okay, I think I'm done, move somewhere else. So it's just, if they just try to look for ways to retain their customers also.
Oluwatomi Mayowa, analyst with Financial Derivatives Company Limited. Thank you so much for talking to us about debt and also cable prices going up. Appreciate your time.